This video is all about the G string, so how to shift, how you place your fingers, your elbow, wrist, arm, hand position, vibrato on the G string, and of course getting a great deep full tone on the G string. If that's interesting, then hit the like button, and if you want to be distracted from your violin practice every time I post a new video, then subscribe to this channel and hit notifications. Hi, I am Zlata, a classical violinist living in Holland, and I help violin players worldwide to overcome their technical struggles and express themselves in music by teaching them all about bow technique. But this video is, besides bowing, also about the left hand technique and vibrato. First, I want to talk about the position of your left and your right arm. Let's start with the bow arm, because a prerequisite of going into left hand technique training is that you can get a good sound out of the G string. So what you want on the G string is that you can put a lot of weight on the bow. So on the E string you need little weight on the bow, and that naturally happens because you have your arm like this. When you go to the G string, then you move this square that you have right here all the way there. But please mind that you don't put it too much there, okay? There are people who've been taught, like, I have to see your armpit on the G string. By the way, this morning in the shower I was thinking like, oh, I'm doing the G string video today, I have to make sure that I shave. But yeah, doing like this, yeah, that doesn't make it comfortable, and I think it doesn't make your sound better. I do think that you need to relax your shoulder, put your shoulder low, and don't try to like put it out there like that. Just have a normal body posture like this. And you go there from here, and you can do that further up the string. You see, then we have not really a square, just like this. And then what a lot of people do is that they dig in this C shape, you see, so that they think that you have to go all the way there because they're afraid they hit the D string. Well, if you're hitting the D string all the time, you must do some whole bows maybe, in a way that you are very close to the D string, but not entirely there. You don't want this to be a habit, because if you have your bow like this, then it's really hard to put weight in it, and the weight that you transfer from your arm into the bow, that really determines the fullness of your sound actually. So not like this, but yeah, if you do it like this, then you almost have your bow parallel to the ground, and then you have the advantage of the gravity. If you do this, you don't. So that's really important. And then you can have a very natural position. You might have your elbow a little bit like this. Some teachers say you mainly have to bend your pinky and then do this if you want a deep tone, and that certainly works. So see what is good for you. I think you should definitely be bending your pinky, so you can have this spring system, but you can have your arm a little bit like this. So these are two alternatives for you to experiment with this. I'm more of the school that I do it like this, so with the wrist a bit up and the elbow a bit, but you also might do it like this. Experiment what is good for you. And the biggest challenge for a lot of people on the G string is to relax that shoulder, keep it low. You don't need to lift your shoulder. You can lift your arm like this. If I do this, I don't have to lift my shoulder, but a lot of people do. A lot of people do, and I can better show you without a violin. They lift their arm and then they also lift their shoulder, and they're uncomfortable and can't put weight in the string. But if you relax your shoulder, you can move like this. It's a different joint. I know nothing about joints, so I can't, but you probably understand what I mean by this. So that's the position of the right arm. Depending on your violin hold and the rests that you have, or no rest, you can help your right hand a bit to tilt your violin, you see? Some people tend to put this part of the shoulder rest really high, and then their violin is like this, and then they think, oh, it's so easy that my violin is up straight or something. But then it doesn't have an advantage for the other strings actually. Because if you do like this, then you can perfectly play on the E string, and then you have this natural position on the G string. So yeah, make sure that your violin hold is like this. I've got a whole video on violin posture and hold. It's not just for beginners. Then you can see all about that. Okay, so I think that's all about the bow arm. If you have questions, leave them please in the comments below. But that was the part about bow arm. I'll go into transferring weight a bit later. In the first position, you can move your arm. Like here you are playing on the E string. You see what happens to my elbow? Then I go to the G string, and then what a lot of people come to me and they say, oh, I can play with my short pinky, etc. There are many professional players who have like a very, very little pinky. So in this case, the size doesn't really matter. What matters is that you have the right hold. So, you know, some people hold their arm like this and they say, oh, my pinky is too small. Well, it's not too small, you just have to make your knuckles parallel to the neck of the violin. Then you see my pinky can be all the way there. I can have 3 violins in a row and still reach the G string of the 3rd violin on the back. Well, that's bragging, I'm not going to test that. So you want this movement and you want this movement, you see? And you can adjust, you know, your violin can be in all sorts of different positions, so you have to find out for yourself where your violin and how it should be placed for you to be able to reach all the notes. So what you can do is just put all your fingers on the G string, make nice and round fingers, and then just move around. You see, you know, every body is different. So you need to find your own hold when you're playing with shoulder rest, without, or whatever construction. Sometimes I see funny constructions on the violins. Whatever construction of rest you have. So yeah, just find something that works for you. Look also at different players, how they do it, because it's very different. You might see old recordings where the violin is held more like that, or where they do a little bit like this. So there are different possibilities in that. And then you might be thinking like, yes, Zlata, of course it's easy in the first position. So that's why we are now going into shifting and then into higher positions. So later in the video we'll go into creating a deep sound and the vibrato, before I forget. Slow motion. You see what happens? Different movements. First of all, more of this. Like you want your fingers to be around the violin. I like to keep my thumb here as much as possible. So I want my arm to embrace the violin like that. You see, sometimes it looks really weird then, but I do have then the strength of my fingers in those higher positions. What you also do, you don't do this. You see, then that doesn't help you. You have to go upwards, okay? So if you shift, you go sideways and upwards. That was again a slow motion. I'll show you from the other side. And the advantage of this is that my hand is really, like, the fingers are really, like, on top of the string. You don't want this and trying to reach it. So I think that's clear about shifting sideways and upward. And you can practice it with a vibrato like that. And do that with every finger, so you can shift with all your fingers. And of course, if you're practicing that, then shift slowly and make sure you can clearly hear the shift, like what you're doing. Maybe you can even do it in a mirror. Okay, so before we go into vibrato, I want to go into creating a deep sound. As I mentioned before, it's really important that you have the right posture and you want to have pronation. So you want to tilt this So you can transfer the weight of your arm. You don't want to press into the string, but you want to use weight. And a great exercise for that is to search for the optimal resonance. How you do that is that you play a very simple scale on one string, and that for each note you are going to search for when you get the deepest, the loudest sound. And you want to use all components of sound, like the hair. You need all the hair, you don't want to tilt your bow here. Contact points. On the G string it sounds best a little bit near the fingerboard, there it speaks most, but if you want it to be a little bit brighter, then you might go a little bit in the direction of the bridge. Bow speed we have, and we have of course the weight of your arm. Another trick on the G string to get a deep sound, and it might sound weird, but think about that you're letting the back of your violin vibrate. So if you're playing, like, think about the back of your violin. I was sitting in an orchestra, and then the concertmaster said this, and it worked for people. So that's something. So on the open string, look for the overtones, look for the resonance, and do lots of bow strokes. And then we go to the A, and then you must see your A string ringing along. You see, my A string is also ringing. That means I'm in tune and I have a good sound, and the violin will resonate, have a lot of overtones. And then I go to the B. You see, I can create a very deep sound there. If you don't play in positions, then just limit yourself to then the third and the fourth finger. And if you want to play the whole G major scale, then we shift now to the third position, to the C. D, and of course the D must resonate. You see, I hope it's visible in the video, but you see the D vibrating, just like the A with the... You see it clearly, it really must ring. And then the fifth position, the E. So search for the good sound. Don't continue until you really have that sound that you want. And then to the F sharp. And then the G. Okay, and do this all without vibrato, because we're really focusing on the sound here and all the proportions of your weight and the bow speed and all those kind of things. So that is a great exercise. So do that exercise and let me know in the comments what your findings are, if you manage to improve your sound. If you practice then after this, which I hope you'll do after watching this video, then you will probably notice that you will have a better sound. Alright, then we covered that. Then we have the vibrato, of course. So do the vibrato thing if you did all the other things that I mentioned before in this video, because you know vibrato also covers up things, so you want everything to kind of be in order before you start using the metronome and do the vibrato. Well, in vibrato the problem on the G string is, and a lot of people have a very narrow and fast vibrato, like a 20 volt vibrato. A lot of people have a vibrato like that, and the thing is, on the G string you need a slower vibrato. So if you're not in control over the tempo of your vibrato, then you'll probably notice that when playing on the G string and you suddenly don't get it to sound as good. So what you need to do is to practice vibrato with a metronome. I recommend doing it like in all tempi, from 60 to 100 and everything in between. But if you really want some improvement on the G string, then start with practicing it at 60 beats per minute. So grab your metronome app, because after this video you're going to practice this and to practice all the other things, is that you really slow down your vibrato. So you do 4 vibrato movements per beat. So let's get the metronome on. Don't you hate practicing with a metronome? I secretly do. I tell all my students it works for them, so yeah, I force myself to it. My kids, by the way, love the metronome. They're fascinated. They're more fascinated than about my playing. So I wonder if we are genetically related at this moment. So then what you want to do is vibrate 4 vibrato. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And it doesn't have to sound good, you just want them to be all 4 there. That's something to practice with all 4 fingers. And for the first finger you want to free up your hand, okay? So if you have it stuck like this, then you know, you just can't move, so free it up. And you can support, you know, your thumb is always the counter player. So that supports the violin a little bit. And for the pinky, some people will tell you that it's not possible to do vibrato with a straight pinky. You might want to curve it right here. In the first position it's perfectly possible. But how I do vibrato with the 4th finger is that I bend this knuckle, but this is yeah, not straight but almost straight. Okay, and do the same exercise as we did for the sound. So do it with all fingers in also all positions. So in the high positions, same principles apply. If you have your hold right, if you don't have your fingers like this reaching for it, because then you can't do a vibrato. But if you follow the steps before, that you can already create a good sound, that you already have the right position, then you can do a vibrato exactly in the same way. It's even easier because you have the support of the sound box, and then you can just do vibrato in higher positions. And of course, the higher you get, the faster your vibrato should be. That's a general rule in vibrato, because the higher note, the higher the frequency, and you need to match your vibrato to it. So the lower you are, the wider and the slower your vibrato needs to be, and the higher you are, the faster. And then if you got that position right, the 4th finger vibrato is the same as we did in the first position. The only thing is maybe in the very high positions, you have less possibility of movement, so you move maybe from an arm or wrist vibrato more to like a wrist finger vibrato or something. Or some people like to use a lot of arm vibrato in the upper regions, but you know, that's an entirely different topic. Just because I couldn't resist a small note about that topic, people tend to use a combination of arm, wrist and finger vibrato, and you change what you use most. So someone asked me lately which vibrato you should use, and those differences are only theoretical. If you look at soloists, they use a combination of the 3 most of the times. So I hope I covered everything about playing on the G string. It was a lot. I hope this is useful. Please let me know in the comments below if it is. If you like this video, then give it a like and subscribe to my channel, because I'd love to see you in a next video lesson. Bye bye!